And let's wrap up the second chapter of Mary Poppins Opens the Door, which is called Mr. Twigley's Wishes. Mr. Twigley has wished all of his wishes, but we don't know what his seventh wish was. Later, when they came to think about it, Jane and Michael could never remember how they got out of Mr. Twigley's house and into Cherry Tree Lane. It seemed as though, at one moment, they were on the dusty stairs, and the next were following Mary Poppins through the pearly evening light. Jane glanced back for one last look at the little house. "Michael," she said, in a startled whisper, "it's gone. Everything's gone." He looked round. Yes, Jane was right. The little street and the old-fashioned houses were nowhere to be seen. There was only the shadowy park before them and the well-known curve of Cherry Tree Lane. "Well, where have we been all afternoon?" said Michael, staring about him. But it needed someone wiser than Jane to answer that question truly. "We must have been somewhere," she said sensibly. But that was not enough for Michael. He rushed away to Mary Poppins and pulled at her best blue skirt. "Mary Poppins, where have we been today? What's happened to Mr. Twigley?" "How should I know?" snapped Mary Poppins. "I'm not an encyclopedia." "But he's gone, and the street's gone. And I suppose the musical box is gone too, the one he went round on this afternoon." Mary Poppins stood still on the curb and stared. "A cousin of mine on a musical box? What nonsense do you talk, Michael Banks?" "But he did," cried Jane and Michael together. "We all went round on musical boxes, each of us to our own true music, and yours was Pop Goes the Weasel." Her eyes blazed sternly through the darkness. She seemed to grow larger as she glared. "Each to our own weasel? Round and round?" Really, she was so angry she could hardly get the words out. "On top of a musical box, did you say? So this is what I get for my pains. You spend all afternoon with a well-brought-up, self-respecting pair like my cousin and myself, and all you can do afterwards is make a mock of us. Round and round with a weasel, indeed. For 2 pins I'd leave you here on the spot and never come back, I warn you." "On top of a musical weasel," she fumed as she stalked through the gathering dusk. Snap, snap went her heels along the pavement. Even her back had an angry look. Jane and Michael hurried after her. It was no good arguing with Mary Poppins, especially when she looked like that. The best thing to do was to say nothing. And be glad there was nobody in the lane to offer her 2 pins. In silence, they all walked along beside her, and thought of the afternoon's adventure, and looked at each other and wondered. "Oh, Mary Poppins. Oh, Mary Poppins," said Mrs. Banks brightly, as she opened the front door. "I'm sorry, but I don't need your cousin after all. I tried the piano again just now, and it's quite in tune, in fact, better than ever." "I'm glad of that, ma'am," said Mary Poppins, stealing a glance at herself in the mirror. "My cousin will make no charge." "Well, I should think not," cried Mrs. Banks indignantly. "Why, he hasn't even been here." "Exactly, ma'am," said Mary Poppins. She sniffed as she turned toward the stairs. Jane and Michael exchanged a secret look. "That must have been the 7th wish," Michael whispered, and Jane gave an answering nod. "Jug, jug, 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 deroo." From the park came a shower of wild, sweet music. It had a familiar sound. "What could that be?" cried Mrs. Banks as she ran to the door to listen. "Good gracious, it's a nightingale." Down from the branches fell the song, note by note, like plums from a tree. It burnt upon the evening air. It throbbed through the listening dark. "How very strange," said Mrs. Banks. "They never sing in the city." Behind her back, the children nodded and looked at each other wisely. "It's Mr. Twigley's," muttered Jane. "He set it free," answered Michael softly. And they knew, as they listened to the burning song, that somewhere, somehow, Mr. Twigley was true as his little golden bird that was singing now in the park. The nightingale sang once more and was silent. Mrs. Banks sighed and shut the door. "I wish I knew where he came from," she said dreamily. But Jane and Michael, who could have told her, were already halfway up the stairs, so they said nothing. There were things that could be explained, they knew, and things that could not be explained. Besides, there were currant buns for tea, and they knew what Mary Poppins would say if they dared to keep her waiting. And that is the end of Chapter 2.